Hi, welcome to another Roboflow training movie. The purpose of this movie is to give you a little overview of what is new in Cumulus 9.2, or in other words, Roboflow 9.2. First of all, let's start with create new workflow. You will notice that in create new workflow there is no longer the ability to select the pre-built Cumulus 8 style workflows. You can still use them if you have them. They're backwards compatible with this version, but you are no longer allowed to select them. The reason for that is that we want to phase out these old style workflows, because the new style workflows are much easier to build, to support, and you only add those functionalities in there that you really need, while the old style workflows usually were a combination of 10 different functionalities, which made it hard to figure out what was to be set and what was not necessary in a particular case. A second thing that changed here is that you now have a new style of workflow called site synchronized files from folder with an FTP site. This was the sync folder FTP workflow in the past. So this is a new style workflow that allows you to synchronize files with an FTP site, either upload, download, or synchronize. Also new is the ability to have more information in the log. Here in the log you have by default, of course, all the information of what the current workflow is doing, on what interval it is running, what the last run was, etc., etc. From when this information updates, and when you click on the refresh now it updates. That's not new, but what is new or was not documented in the past is that you have your individual logs per file, per workflow, per date. It goes back 20 days. After 20 days, the oldest workflow on the if you run it on the 21st day, it will delete that oldest log. But you have also an application log, which captures any log information that is not bound to a specific workflow, but is application log information. You have also the ability to access the blacklist. The blacklist is in case of hot folder or watch folder workflow, the place where Roboflow stores the names of the files that it doesn't want to process anymore, or that shouldn't be processed anymore because they caused trouble, an error, a Cumulus cataloging error or something like that. They will be added to that list. You can edit the list, remove the items you want to be removed, save it, and in the next run Roboflow will reread this blacklist and take that in consideration. Another important button is the show version log. The show version log gives you all the modifications that were done to the web interface of Roboflow and all the modifications that were done to the native Roboflow engine. And so you can find if there was any actions changed, any new functionalities, bug fixes, etc., etc. The list is extensive. If you look, the previous release was here, so all this has been changed, modified, added inside Roboflow. There is a document describing all these changes, and here's a short overview. We saw this show version in the log, in the show log. There's multiple line selection in action scripts. We will see that in a minute. You can import and export parts of an action script. We will see that in a minute. You can make your script window bigger. And there's a new workflow template, as we already saw. and the old style workflows were removed. You can import, there was a bug fix in the interface for importing a workflow group, and what is new is that in Cumulus 9 you have a workflow, a new action group called Cumulus Workflow, which allows you to give you information about the users and gives you the ability to play around, parse, get user information, get roles, all the Cumulus roles, the Cumulus users, and maybe loop through them and do something with it. These functions return the names, for instance, of the users, or the logins, and the role names as one text separated by semicolons, and then you could process these text by this processing action that allows you to parse a string into separate parts, separated, for instance, for every semicolon that is in there, or comma, or whatever, or tab, and then process the elements of that text, which automatically means that you are, for instance, in case of users, processing every user underneath that action. In the Cumulus record, you now can apply permission templates. There's a new action that fixed the bug, is copy asset from record to vault record, which means that if you are using the vault and you are copying a record from one catalog to another, and you want also the asset to be copied, then you must be careful that if your vault, if you want to move that asset from a file or a vault to an exclusive vault or to a vault anyway, then you can use this action to do the copy. You also have the ability to log usage. If you're using the asset usage history, you can log usage as well from inside Roboflow. In the Cumulus category, you have apply permission templates. In the Cumulus catalog, you can now create collections. So you can add a record to a collection, remove a record from a collection. You can save a collection and you can save it as a pin collection. Saving this as a pin collection means that you can save it so it opens, so you can access the URL and opens in sites or in the web client. In the conditional group, you now have a new function called test record, which allows you to test things about a record. If the file is available, if the file is vaulted, if the file is versioned, if all that kind of stuff you can test a record for. In the file folder group, you have a new action that allows you to create a zip from a folder. And then there's a number of bug fixes in there. Some of the there were some parameter errors in some of the scripts and some of the actions, so they are all fixed, and you can find them, of course, in the show log. So I'm not going to go over them one by one. Just remember, if you have an action that had a bug that in your script, updating your Roboflow is not enough. You have to remove that action from your script and add it again, because it might have to pick up a new syntax from the interface from the backend. So then, as a final thing, I'm quickly going to say something about some special features that exist in Roboflow. They've been there for years, but they were never really well documented. So one of those things is that you have the ability to store some parameter, for which we use store tag, and that parameter can influence your workflow. One of those parameters is hot folder delete file boolean. This hot folder delete file boolean is a parameter that influences the hot folder template workflow. By default, if a file is processed by a hot folder template workflow, at the end it is deleted from that hot folder. Well, if for some reason you don't want that behavior, you want the file to stay in that hot folder, then you can add this parameter in the parameter part of your workflow, in the parameters part of your workflow, to any of the parameters, and it will store that value and influence that behavior. The store tag, once it is executed, resolves into nothing, so it will not influence the parameter where you put this. It will just disappear and be an internal stored tag that is used in the workflow. Max files to process is a parameter in a hot folder workflow, where if you want a hot folder workflow to process files regularly and quickly, and they don't have to be processed all at once, you can say whenever one file comes in, for instance, automatically process it. So it finds one file and it will immediately process it. Or by default, it looks for all files and starts processing it. So there is by default no limit. So if you add this, you could say after 100 files, after one file, after 10 files, and so that could make things easier or quicker. Maximum email error count. By default, this is set to 100 per workflow, which means that the workflow will only send out 100 emails per day, error emails. That is to avoid if there's maybe the Cumulus server is down, or the volume where files has to be picked up are not available. In all those cases, it would keep sending your emails. Well, this limits it to 100 per day. Show count interval is for show count interval is for a watch folder workflow. When it makes an inventory and you have a slow network and a big or a lot of files, then it might happen that if it takes, let's say, an hour to make an inventory of your files, it could be that the Cumulus catalog connection by then is down. So if by enabling this feature that it shows the count interval, you can nicely say every 1,000 record files you find, or every 10,000, it will show that it got to that point, and at that point it will do a search in the catalog of that watch folder just to keep it open. That's to avoid if you have parameters set that connections that are not used are disconnected, for instance, within 1 hour, you could lose your Cumulus connection. This workflow makes sure, this parameter makes sure that this doesn't happen. Then there's a max length folder path parameter in a watch folder. On some platforms, sometimes you have the problem that in a watch folder, in a hot folder, when it catalogs a file, if the file path becomes longer than 256 characters, that it gets an error from the operating system. This happens rarely, but it happens. By default, in Roboflow, there is a file path set to 200, which means if a folder path is longer than 200, it will not process it. It will add a line to the log saying skipped because longer than 200 characters. If you want to override that parameter, then you can set this parameter, add this parameter, and maybe set it, for instance, to 400 or 1,000 if your environment doesn't have any problems with it. So this was a quick overview in text. Let's go inside Roboflow and see a couple of the things that I was talking about. So if I go inside this workflow, I have here in the parameters the ability to add a new parameter. And sometimes it can be useful if you are creating these workflows. Some of the elements that are used in your workflow you could just use them here, like this example in this workflow. It opens a catalog, and I do that by selecting it here from the drop down. But on the other hand, it might be useful to have that parameter here if it ever has to change, that I don't have to go and find it in my script. So and definitely if you are reusing these scripts for customers or for different installations, in terms of you might have a staging, a development, and a production environment, and in those cases only the root folder changes or the catalog name changes, or some basic stuff changes, well, then you could add here some parameters that are used in the script. How do we do that? Well, I can say new, and in new I can say, for instance, the parameter name will be my catalog, and I can say okay, and I can say, mind you, then you don't have a selection because it doesn't know what your parameter is. For him it's just plain text, so then you have to type it in. But the advantage of this procedure is that you don't, yes, and you can say the main catalog, that you don't have to go in your script and find it. You can always go in and edit it, and that means that here you would not use it by drop down, but you would type it here and do it that way. So that would be an alternative, and that way this will always use that parameter that you just created here in the script called my catalog. So that is an option. There is a new placeholder, there is a new parameter, let's say here, same here, I have a target folder that I defined here, but maybe I don't want this target folder to be here. I want this target folder to be defined up front, so I could create a parameter here, have defined that target folder here, and put the path to that target folder in here. That way you don't have to go inside your workflow actions if it ever needs to change. And so same procedure here, I could say new, etc., etc. Then also something new, as was mentioned, you were always able to do this, but unfortunately, because this is a multi-tab page, it doesn't grow automatically to the size you would like it. So with this plus and min signs, you now have the ability to do that. And with the arrows, but this workflow doesn't have sub actions, but with these arrows you can open levels of subtables. So let me see where I would have here, probably. Yes, you can see here I have an action with sub actions. If I do this, it automatically opens one level at a time. If I do that, it closes the levels. So that gives you, that's also a new functionality. Another functionality is that you are able to copy paste multiple lines. So you can say, I want to copy this and I want to put it inside here underneath that, and I say paste, and it automatically added those two lines. You can also do that same copy paste to another script. So I can copy these four. I can say copy, cancel, go to another workflow and add them here, and then I have them here. Important to remember is that if you have multiple levels, you should so sub actions, you should not select items from sub levels at the same time. So don't do this. If you want to copy this, if you will copy this, it will copy it completely with whatever is inside to the other side. If you do copy that kind of stuff, then sub actions, if I do paste, it doesn't allow you to go inside yet. You have to save it, and then when you come back into the workflow, you will see that you have exactly all those things. You should not select a top level and then things inside. That does not work. It will put it both at the same level. It will not see the two elements as being having a master slave or a sub action of a master action. And so this does not work. It's not possible. And so this is possible at the same level. You can select, multi-select, not. You can also select these two and these two, but they will be copied as being on the same level. So that is also a possibility. You can cut, multi-cut, etc. You can also do a selection and export it. So this selection is then stored here under a selection, and this file gives you then the ability to import it somewhere else. So you can import that snippet that you just exported in another place. If you don't select anything, then it will if you don't select anything, it will export the whole script as something that you could copy paste, import into another area. A very nice new feature is, for instance, I have here a variable that I created. I stored a part of a file as text, file with this file name. Now in the copy move instruction here, I want to be able to get to that information. So I want to use that file name. Remember, in Roboflow you use the tag, but all this is pretty hardcore internal stuff maybe. So we invented, if you type in 2 hash marks and you wait a few seconds in between, it will add a new drop down here, and this drop down will show you all the stored tags in this particular script, and the tags that come out of the box from the global and the tags that come from the workflow, like the hot folder and a hot subfolder, and the one you created. And it gives you some of the most common used script elements. So you can see an uppercase, you can see a date format thing, you can see a store tag, which we saw earlier, a lower, a tab, a character turn. So those characters that are most often used are in here. So if I, in this case, want to rename a file using a part of the file with the file date, I can select this and it will put it automatically in the part where I was, and I can edit this, of course. It's just plain text. I can say I want my file name to look like this. I do an underscore and I want another tag, so I do hash, and again this mem drop down appears, and I can now find the stored tag that I created a few moments ago in another part of the script, and it automatically replaces your 2 hashes. It puts in between the value that you added. And if I have a look here, and you see this was the tag that it showed you. So that makes building the workflows and using those stored tags a little bit easier than it was in the previous version. In terms of new actions, as I told you before, there is a test record. I'm quickly gonna show it to you in the conditional. There's a test record, and the test record gives you the ability to test. So you can say, I'm testing my record. I'm testing if the asset is available. I'm testing if the record is available, if the asset is versioned, if the asset is accessible as a file. Is it something as native on the network? Can he can Roboflow access it? Is vaulted is a sub-asset. So a sub-asset means, is it maybe not a real file that has been cataloged, but maybe it's a page of a PDF. Maybe it's a file of a zip. So these sub records or sub-assets that are created. Is the asset checked out? Is it a master or is it a slave if you are using variants or other assignments? So all that is now available for you to test, and then underneath put the actions if it returns true or false. You could so also a new group. So if you are a new group of actions are under Cumulus workflow, where I could say, if you work with roles, store all roles, and then from a role you could say store all users, or you could say get me the user info. And so you could get, for instance, from the Cumulus record you could get the cataloging user, and then from the cataloging user, from that info you could ask his email. And if you have his email, you can send him an email. So somebody catalogs a file, and maybe now you want to send him an email. Important. And so this was new. Processing a part of a file is something, part of a text, sorry, is also new, which is very easy to use. If you want to have a repeat, maybe you have 10 fields called description 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 10, and you want to process them in a loop. Well, you just use text saying 1, 2, 1, 3, 4 with this parameter, and you could say either it's a stored text or it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can say, okay, the separator in this case is 7, and the output catalog is a number. And then you will, as a result, have under the tag number a stored text with 1, and it will repeat the loop 5 times, and you could do something with it. So that's also a nice new feature. And of course you have the ability to apply permission template to a category or to a record, and there is also the copy asset from Vault, which is also new. You have also the ability to work with collections. So you can have a collection, you can add a record to collection. So what would you do is open a catalog, then say this instruction add to collection. You could do a find somewhere else, or you are processing cataloging a file and the record, you add this to this collection, and at the end you could then say I want to save this collection just as a collection or as a pin collection, which then gives you the URL back that you can use to mail it to that particular user. So there are many new functionalities and features. So if you want to learn more about them individually, I suggest you just check out my other training movies. If you subscribe to my channel, you get notified whenever I upload something new. So thank you for joining, and see you in another movie.